I don't know, but okay, so we can start, Jamila.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Greetings to this forum of the Cultural and Literary Forum that we have been hosting for the last almost 2.5 years. And this is our 31st session and the 4th session that we are doing on the G20 countries. A warm welcome to all the AIWC members, office bearers, friends, well-wishers, students who have joined us. This forum, as you know, was started 2 years back, just when we thought that we could not get across and convey ideas and information and help one another. We resorted to this online platform, and that is how we started this literary and cultural forum for the AIWC. Usha, who was the zonal officer at that time, and now she manages another portfolio with AIWC, has been the backbone of this forum. And I'm very glad that we have been able to carry this on without a break. I think the only break we had was once, I think, even when both of us could not get together and organize it. But I must say we are very proud of the fact that we have been able to hold this continuously. Under the G20 countries lectures, we have had talks on Canada, Australia, Japan, and this time we have Sruti Ramachandran to talk to us about China, its culture, its social fabric, and its literature. She will be talking to us on modern Chinese culture and literature. Sruti is an old student of the Institute of English, and I'm very happy to introduce her to this forum. She was one of my favorite students, and also one of the students who did very well in her academics. She came to us as a rank holder for her BA, sustained that rank during the PG period that she did with us at the Institute, went on to do her MPhil and then later her PhD. Her PhD is on Chinese, on a Chinese writer and the culture of China. So I think we have got a very appropriate person to talk to us about China and its social fabric. Sruti is now the assistant professor in a government college, formerly of Women's College, and now in Attingal. She is also the recipient of the FLAIR program, which is actually a program that the state government started in 2012-13. This was a program that looked at enhancing research and also enhancing linkages in academic innovation with other countries. And under this program, she had the opportunity to go to UK and interact with academicians and scholars there. And she brought back with her the rich, I should say, literary academic inputs that she could give her students and also pass on to her fellow colleagues. That was part of the FLAIR program that after they came back, they had to, in fact, impart what they had learned there to their faculty, to their colleagues, as well as to their students. And I think it has paid off. And a lot of our teachers now are at the forefront of academic research. Sruti is also a research supervisor, and she has been guiding research students in a number of different topics. And she is also an academic leader, I should say, who I think when colleges think about calling someone to give a lecture, Sruti's name is always there. And she's also a speaker who delivers brilliantly and is able to put across her ideas well. So a very warm welcome to you, Shruti, to this forum. And I'm very happy.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
here
Thank you so much.
to give us this lecture on China. When we think about China, the first thing, of course, that comes to our mind is the cuisine of China, the food, the Chinese food that we all in Kerala seem to simply love. But there is a lot more behind the Great Wall of China, which was built in over 2,500 years. And I understand it covers a long mile of 13,170 mile structure that cuts across many provinces, spans 10 provinces, and is perhaps the hallmark of China. But we also know that China was a country that always kept its policies, its people, its cultures within those great walls, and had the outside world did not have access to what happened within in China for a very long time. And I must say that it was during the Beijing conference in 1995, when the Fourth World Conference on Women was convened in Beijing. I think it was then that people seriously began to think of China and the women in China and what was happening within those great walls of China, the legal rights of the Chinese people. Interestingly, during some of the courses that I did in foreign countries, I had the opportunity to meet Chinese academicians. And one of the things that I found is that they are very fluent in Chinese, but was not fluent in English. So they found it very difficult. But slowly they were going outside those Chinese walls to learn more and to enrich themselves. And today we know that China stands second in population and perhaps first in its economic prosperity, and it's slowly catching up. So any article that you buy today has a stamp on it which says made in China. So the richness of the industry that has grown in China is now visible to the rest of the world, which was not like informally in the early years. Also, when you look at the writing that is being done in China, the language that is being used, the calligraphy of the Chinese alphabets, it has been understood and it has been accepted as one of the most beautiful forms of writing, the calligraphy of the Chinese language. And often it is associated with the poetry of the land. So this calligraphy not only conveys something that is just a word, but the word also carries with it the weight of history, the weight of the culture of the Chinese people. So the Chinese language, the Chinese food, the Chinese wall, these are all things that immediately strike us. But also we must understand that China is a very big country. And like Russia, it's the border that it has with other countries is 14 in number. That is, China is surrounded by 14 other countries, just as Russia is surrounded by 14 other countries. And it has 5 time zones. So you can think about the vastness of China. Also, when these Chinese people came out to study in the Western universities, one of the things that we immediately identified was that the west of China and the east of China are almost totally different from one another. There is more rural culture to the west, and the industrialization and things like that has come more to the east, Hong Kong and those countries that are there. So industrialization is the growth of industrialization is not uniform in China. Even today, there are very many backward regions. There was a Chinese delegation that came about 6 years back, I remember, the government of Kerala. and I had the opportunity to meet them. And they were all talking about how, in spite of all attempts by the Chinese government, there are many areas in China that have not acquired literacy even today. So it's not like China has a uniform prosperity, or China, everywhere in China it is all good. We have to accept the fact that there is still poverty, there is still a lot of illiterate people in China. So a big country and one of the G20 countries. The agenda of the G20 countries will become very significant for China in the coming years. How will other countries be able to help China, and what will China's contribution be to the rest of the world is very, very significant. And I think we need to dwell deeper into these things. And Sruti here will tell us more about the People's Republic of China. They call themselves not just China, but the People's Republic of China. So, and dressed in red, Sruti is here to tell us about Red China. So a very warm welcome to you, Sruti, and to all the members here once again. And I request you to deliver your talk. Thank you. Sruti.
Good day to one and all. At the very outset, let me thank AIWC and Dr. Jamila Begum, Jamila ma'am to me, for this honor to be a part of the series on G20 nations. I'm indeed privileged to the world's oldest civilizations, China. So now I would like to share my screen, and I'll also be muting my video. I hope this is visible.
Yes, yes, go ahead.
Okay. So this is what I'll be talking on today: modern Chinese culture and literature, an introduction. And the title of my slide, Chinese Culture Presenting the Past. Now, in fact, it refers to two different things. Now, the title represents both an attempt to provide a glimpse into the history of cultural China, and also the massive efforts by the present Chinese administration to reinvigorate Chinese cultural history. So I mean two things when I say presenting the past. And my China's culture, it is a very unique blend of its unique history, the communist movement, and also modernity. So that is why I have divided the talk, the session on Chinese culture into three. The first one would provide a very brief account of the imperial history and culture of China. And then I would be looking at the history of communism and the impact that communism has had on Chinese society. And the third part of cultural China would talk about contemporary Chinese society. The second part of the lecture actually deals with Chinese literature.
Excuse me, Sruti, will you put on your video so that we can see you when you're talking?
Oh, okay, all right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I was just talking about the route map, where in cultural China, I'll be discussing the three imperial China, the People's Republic of China, and also contemporary China. And the second part of my presentation actually involves modern Chinese literature, where I'll be talking exclusively about 20th century Chinese literature. Now, when I talk about imperial China, second.
Yes.
Okay. The first dynasty of China it has a very long list of dynasties. So if you look at the timeline, it is 2070 BC. So I just want that to sink in. It is 2070 BC. That is when China's dynasty begins. And if the timeline is absolutely amazing, the oldest dynasty, which is the Xia dynasty, is said to have originated at around 2070 BC. And what we can see in the imperial dynasties of China is how continuous they are. The continuity here is the bedrock of Chinese culture. It is continuous. There haven't been any breaks, major breaks, as we can see in Chinese cultural history or the imperial history of China. Now, the Xia dynasty, 2070 to 1600 BC, is widely regarded as the first dynasty, but many critics argue that it is mythical. It is a figment of imagination, it's fictional. And you also have a very famous name associated with the dynasty, Yu the Great. In fact, almost all students or almost all Chinese know about this mythical figure called Yu the Great, who is said to be maybe one of the first emperors of China, fictional, mythical. However, Yu the Great is it's a very popular figure in the public imagination. And this is where we find the beginnings of China's hereditary dynasty. Now, this dynasty is supposed to have originated in and around the Yellow River. Yellow River is the Huanghe, which is the second largest river in China after the Yangtze. And Yellow River is a very popular river in China because, again, it is the fountainhead of Chinese civilization. Now, it is called the Yellow River because of the color of the sand or the soil that it carries. It is supposed to be rich and fertile. However, it is also known as the River of Tears or the River of Sorrow because a series of floods have been associated with the Yellow River. And China has always had to deal with flooding of the Yellow River. Now we move on to the next dynasty, which is the Shang dynasty. Now it is one of the first dynasties with historical records. And the oracle bones that we find, that archaeologists have dug up from the Shang dynasty period, they have these pictographs in which we can actually see Chinese characteristics. So Chinese writing, in fact, we can find records of it right from the Shang dynasty period. And what I have there is a picture of an oracle bone. And jade carvings. Now, jade is something that we normally associate with China, jade ornaments or the color green. But however, the most expensive sort of jade is not green. It is, they call it a mutton fat white, that kind of a color. That is one of the most expensive jade that we can get our hands on. And here we have a carving of a water buffalo. And this is from the Shang dynasty. You can see the timeline there. It's all BC. And that too, 1600 to 1046 BC. And here in the Shang dynasty, we have the recorded beginnings of the Chinese civilization. So we can actually find records, written records from Shang dynasty onwards. Moving on, the Zhou dynasty. Now, it's one of the longest dynasties in Chinese history. It is very famous for its bronzeware. And two of the greatest religions of China, Confucianism and Taoism, have emerged from this particular period, the Zhou dynasty. Now, these are the two major religions of China even today. And Confucianism has shaped the imagination of the public for close to 2 millennia. And it still shapes the imagination of the Chinese. And the core ideas of Confucianism are benevolence, propriety, filial piety, integrity, shame, righteousness. Now, all these are very, very important to the Chinese. And one of the ways in which successive governments have managed to keep the people of China under control is by invoking Confucius. Confucius has always been a political tool in China. Now, at the other extreme, like during the same period, it is amazing that another religion which challenged the tenets of Confucianism, Taoism, emerged. Now, in fact, as a counterculture at the very same time. And Taoism is about Tao, or the way of the universe, and it aims for a balance between the humans and the universe. So that is what Taoism speaks about. It is much more relaxed and fluid than the rigidism of Confucianism. Now here I have portraits of Confucius and also Lao Tzu, who's supposed to be the father of Taoism. And then the two major books, Analects of Confucius and the Book of the Tao, which are very, very popular in China. Moving on, the next dynasty is the Qin dynasty. Now, Qin dynasty is the first dynasty to unite China under an emperor. So this is where we have the emperor of China. And the first emperor of China is Qin Shi Huang. Now, most Chinese emperors are addressed by the title Huang Di. It is after the first emperor of China. And this is where we find China's feudal era, the beginnings of China's feudal era. And also two major constructions. One would be the Great Wall of China. It is said that portions of the wall were already there during the Qin dynasty. And it is the Emperor Huangdi who actually reinforced these already existing walls. And the Great Wall of China is an architectural marvel. It is a series of fortification built as a military defensive line against the nomadic tribes from the north. And it is around 20,000 kilometers in length. And it was widely rumored to be the only man-made structure seen from the moon. But modern scientists have rebuffed that. They say it is not possible to see the Great Wall of China from the moon because it is very difficult to distinguish it from what is immediately beside it, that is Earth. You can't really distinguish the wall and the mountains. So they say that it is not a true statement. However, that doesn't make it less impressive. It is as impressive as ever, the Great Wall of China, and many tourists flock to China just to experience the Great Wall. And again, when the first emperor of China died, a terracotta army was built to accompany this emperor into the afterlife. And this was only discovered in the 1970s, where you have this entire army made of terracotta figurines. And this was found in the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang. And this is around 8,000 soldiers in number. And it is said that they differ. You cannot find two figures who are the same, who are alike. In fact, there are minor variations, be it the uniform, because they differ in ranks. So the uniforms are different, their facial expressions are different. And this is again something amazing, which has come from the Qin dynasty. Moving on, the Han dynasty. Now, the Han dynasty timeline is just, for comparisons, the Holy Roman Empire somewhere began in the 1st century AD. So you can just imagine where the Han dynasty and the other dynasties of China are. The Han dynasty, it's one of the most powerful and important dynasties of China, one of the very influential dynasties. Now, here is where Confucianism is granted almost an orthodox status, and it becomes a sort of state religion, and a lot of power is given to the Confucian scholars. And you also have the invention of paper, and this is one of the court officials in China called Ke Lan. He invents paper during this time. And another significant feature is the Silk Road. Now, the Silk Road is a series of roads. It is not just one road. It is a series of networks, both overland and maritime networks, which helped China open trade on the Silk Road, and it gave them access to the Western world. And through the Silk Road, silk gunpowder, which shaped the histories of the Western world, spices, etc., reached the Western world. And one more important religion, Buddhism. In fact, Buddhism today is the largest. Now, in fact, Buddhism came through the Silk Road from India. From India, Buddhism enters China. So Han Dynasty is extremely important for that, the Silk Road Buddhism and also Confucianism. Next, we move on to the northern dynasties, Wei Jin and the southern and northern dynasties. So what we see during this period is the Sinicization that occurs throughout China. Now, this is where non-Chinese ethnic groups are assimilated into the Chinese culture, particularly to the ethnic identity of the Han Chinese. Now, the Han Chinese is the single largest ethnic group in China. And this is the period where massive Sinicization occurs throughout China. And that is one of the things that we see about Chinese culture. Though other cultures or other ethnic groups have come to China, have invaded China, China has always managed to maintain the Han supremacy. So even when we had emperors from the Manchu dynasty or the Mongol invasion, China has always tried to maintain Han supremacy, which it does even to this day. Now, it is in this time that the now famous Ballad of Mulan was composed. So it is a song from the Northern Dynasty period, and Disney has made it into a very popular movie, and Mulan is very popular today with young girls who dream of, who think about this young girl who joins the army disguised as a male. And so she is very popular today in China, and all over it was a Hollywood movie that Disney made, and movie happens to be very popular among children. So this is when Ballad of Mulan was composed. Then the Sui dynasty. Now, this dynasty has created the imperial examinations, Sui dynasty period up to 1905, when they were finally abolished. So this system of examinations created a set of people, the intellectuals, the scholar gentry, who have had who were placed on a very high pedestal in China. And intellectuals is a term that one usually finds commonly used in China, and many Westerners have found that very uncomfortable. They're like, when Chinese writers identify themselves as intellectuals, many Westerners do not understand why. But this is when the intellectuals or the scholar gentry were made. They had the imperial examinations, and this examination ensured that the bureaucrats had a common knowledge of writing. They were well versed in classical Chinese, and they had a common literary style, which the officials practiced. And this has had a profound influence on modern civil service administrative functions in other countries. In fact, the Japanese have borrowed from it, the British have borrowed from it, India has borrowed from it, the exams, the imperial examination system. And China has also had a huge impact on Japan. And this is a time when a number of Japanese emissaries came to study the culture, economy, and political system, which have influenced Japanese culture. Now, Buddhism, Confucianism, Chinese writing or the Chinese script, and Chinese methods of astronomy, cuisine, and also the use of chopsticks has come from China. And these are the major influences on Japanese culture. Moving on, the Tang dynasty. The Tang dynasty is known for its political stability, and the only female empress, sorry about the emperor there, the empress in Chinese history, Wu Zetian. Now, she is the only woman in China, only empress in China who has been legitimately accorded the title of Huangdi, which is a Chinese emperor. And she, along with another empress, who was a consort, were allowed to wear yellow robes, which are usually reserved only for the Chinese emperor. The yellow robe is associated with the Chinese emperor, and she was allowed to wear it. And she's the only legitimate female emperor in Chinese history. Now, the Tang dynasty is very popular. It is a golden age for pottery, the ceramics, painting, and also poetry. Now, here I have a picture there of a tri-glazed ceramic or a pottery, a piece of pottery, and the tri-glazed colors are yellow, green, and brown. These are the prominent colors that are used in the tri-glazed poetry. And it is in this time that painting of the people developed. So we find in Chinese paintings, we have different kinds of paintings, and this is where a focus was on the people. And I have an representative painting there. And poetry was also extremely popular. And Tang poetry talked about seasons, changing seasons. It celebrated nature and the beauty of nature, and as well as friendships. So it is amazing that over 49,800 poems from the Tang dynasty have survived to the modern times. So that just shows about the profuse output of Tang poetry that we see. So this is from a famous poet, Li Bai, Thoughts on a Silent Night. Moonlight falls at the foot of my bed, seeming like frost on the frozen ground. I look up and see the bright moon and look down, reminded of my hometown. So Li Bai was exiled. And this is him being nostalgic about his hometown. So this is just an example of Tang poetry. And this is this period is famous for pottery, poetry, and paintings. Now moving on, the Song dynasty. The Song dynasty, the four great inventions from China, that is paper, printing, compass, and gunpowder, they were further developed by the time of the Song dynasty. And it is also said that paper money was used for the first time during the Song dynasty. And this period is also known as the Great Age of Chinese landscape. Now, most of us are, in awe of the Chinese landscape paintings. Now, they're extremely popular. Like you usually find it on scrolls, and a minimum use of colors. It's mostly ink on paper and a very subtle and restrained use of colors. Now, the typical name for landscape paintings is shan shui paintings. Now, shan stands for mountains and shui stands for water. So the paintings are mostly about mountains and rivers. So that is what we find in many paintings from the Song dynasty. So this is an example that I have of a Song dynasty landscape painting. Next is the Yuan dynasty. This is the first foreign-led dynasty. It was maybe for the first time that China comes under another dynasty, the Mongol dynasty. Now, the Mongols were fierce, ferocious people, and here we have a photo of Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan is the grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan. Now, and Kublai Khan becomes the emperor in China, and it was during this period that Marco Polo, the famed Venetian traveler, visits China, and he's said to have met Kublai Khan in his residence, Xanadu, which is extremely familiar to all literature students because of the very famous poem by Coleridge. In Xanadu did Kublai Khan a stately pleasure dome built. So Xanadu is something that we all love to think about, and we conjure up Xanadu in our minds. And Marco Polo is said to have visited China, even met the emperor. That was during the Yuan dynasty. Next is the Ming dynasty. The Ming dynasty happens to be the last imperial dynasty which was ruled by the Han Chinese. Now, Ming dynasty is very famous for its porcelain and ceramics. So we think of the blue and white porcelain, the cobalt blue and white porcelain from China, which is very famous. And this Ming dynasty was a time when porcelain or the craft in porcelain flourished. And we have many famous ceramics or porcelain ware from the Ming dynasty. This was also a time when the Forbidden City was constructed, or the construction started of the Forbidden City. And Forbidden City, as we know, is the imperial palace in Beijing. And this is where 24 Chinese emperors have spent their lives. And Forbidden City was forbidden for the common man. Only royalty and officials could enter the premises of the Forbidden City, and workers in the Forbidden City were forbidden to talk about it to the general public. And Forbidden City, the prominent colors used are yellow and red tiles. And it is said that the tiles are yellow in color, and they are designed in such a way that birds cannot sit on the tiles. I don't know if it's true, but this is what I've read, that birds actually find it very difficult to sit on the tiles of the buildings in the Forbidden City. And the emperor is said to have built 9,999.5 rooms, because had he built 10,000 rooms, it would be equivalent to the palace in heaven. So he didn't want to offend the gods, and he constructed 9,999.5 rooms. And Forbidden City is an amazing architectural marvel, and it is there even in for all the tourists to see. When we go to China, you can see it in Beijing. It's right there. And the last imperial dynasty is the Qing dynasty from 1644 to 1912. Now, the Qing dynasty is the last imperial dynasty led by the Manchus, again, another foreign tribe. Now, there was an explosion in exports. Cotton, silk, tea, and ceramics were exported to various parts of the world. Now, this was a time of massive political upheaval in China. There were a lot of internal as well as external upheavals or disruptions in Chinese political history during this time. And one of the very famous wars, the Opium Wars, was fought during this particular time. It was between Britain and China, and this led to a generation of opium addicts in China. And if you look at the history of the Opium Wars, China was forced to give up Hong Kong during the first Opium War. And during the second Opium War, China had to open up more of its ports. And this was actually a time when the isolationist China was opening up, or was forced to open up, and foreigners were were allowed in China. They were allowed to trade in China. They were allowed to come and stay in China. And the Opium Wars was one of the first times when China was actually opening up to the foreign world. And then we also have the first Sino-Japanese War, where the war broke out between China and Japan. And this was over Korea, over the dominance over Korea. And China was defeated. And this happened to be quite a shock for the public. How can the Middle Kingdom be possibly defeated? And China was defeated, and China was forced to hand over Taiwan to the Japanese. And there were a lot of internal conflicts also. The Taiping Rebellion, where these are the rebellions which actually shook the Qing dynasty. And the Taiping Rebellion, it was a religious rebellion, mostly by a Christian preacher who revolted against the Qing dynasty. And there is also the Boxer Rebellion, which was an anti-Christian, anti-foreign rebellion, which was supported by the Qing dynasty. So these rebellions internally and the wars with external forces permanently weakened the Qing dynasty. And in fact, it is these internal and external conflicts that paved the way for many nationalistic movements in China. And it was in 1912 that the very famous Dr. Sun Yat-sen of the Nationalist Party, he declares the Republic of China. And this is when provinces formally announce their separation from the Qing dynasty. So that is when, in 1912, you have the Republic of China being established. Now, next, again, after 1912, it's a lot of political upheavings in China. In 1919, there is a rebellion, which is very famous, called the May 4th Rebellion. And this was where the written vernacular Chinese replaces classical Chinese. So it's a very important, significant event where you don't really have to learn classical Chinese, and you can learn the language that you, or you can write in the language that you actually speak. So this was one of the takeaways from the May 4th rebellion. And then in 1921, the Chinese Communist Party is officially formed. However, it's not a smooth sailing for the Communist Party in China, and they have stiff opposition from the Nationalist Party. Now, in fact, Sun Yat-sen and the Chinese communists got along extremely well, and the communists regard Sun Yat-sen as one of their founders. However, things went south when Chiang Kai-shek became the head of the Nationalist Party, and there was a lot of bad blood going on between the Nationalist Party and the Communist Party of China. And in fact, a civil war breaks out in China in 1931 between these two factions, these two parties. And the Chinese Communist Party, or the Red Army, takes a retreat. They know that they will be defeated by the nationalist forces, so they take a retreat, and that is regarded as the historical Long March. Now, a Long March is a military retreat undertaken by the Red Army, and it is a 10,000-kilometer march where the headquarters of the Communist Party of China is relocated to the northwestern part of China from the southwestern part of China. So it's a massive relocation by the Chinese communists, the Red Army. And it is said that, figures vary, 86,000 people or 86,000 soldiers started when the Red March, and then the Long March started, there were 86,000 soldiers. But when it ended after covering 10,000 kilometers and after 1 year, only 8,000 of them survived. So this is what the Red March was all about, the Long March was all about by the Red Army. And they went through very difficult terrain in China, and I have a picture there. And in fact, the Long March is said to have consolidated Mao Zedong's power in the Communist Party. Now, in fact, when the party was formed, and even when the civil war was going on, there were very powerful leaders in the Chinese Communist Party. But after the Long March, Mao emerged as one of the most powerful political leaders of the Communist Party of China. So the Long March is quite significant for party history, the communist history. Then in that period, we also have the second Sino-Japanese War, and this was over the invasion of Manchuria. And in fact, Japan was initially doing very well, but because of the World War, Japan was forced to surrender, and Taiwan was returned to Chinese control. So that happened as recent as 1945. Taiwan was given back to China. Now, October 1st, 1949, People's Republic of China is founded by Mao Zedong. And this was the time when Chiang Kai-shek, along with his followers, leave China, Chinese mainland, and go to Taiwan. And here we have the founding of the People's Republic of China. You have Mao and other communist leaders formally announcing the People's Republic of China. And communism or the communist movement has exerted a very, very powerful influence on Chinese culture and imagination. Now, I also have the Chinese flag, the red flag, with the red and yellow, again, two very significant, culturally significant colors. The yellow robe is actually, the yellow is a color which is associated with royalty in China. And here, of course, but in this flag, the red stands for the communist movement. The big star stands for the Communist Party. And there are varying interpretations as to what the four small stars are. One of the interpretations is that it stands for the four professions, historic professions in China: the scholar gentry, the peasants, the artisans, and the tradesmen, the four the so-called professions in China. But there are varying interpretations as to what those four stars are. However, the big star is the CCP, the Communist Party of China, and the red that you see is communism. And Now we come to some of the policies of the CCP. The first one which they introduced was something called as the 100 Flowers campaign in China, which came about 1956-57. Now this was launched by Mao Zedong, and this is a very interesting campaign. This is when the government, exhorted the people, in fact, forced them to criticize the government. Now, the people were asked to write letters. People were asked to, put up on posters. They were asked to write, to speak directly to the leaders. And what they wanted was a criticism of the government, so that the aim was to improve the governance. So they wanted people to question the government, and this sparked a series. Initially, people were a little reluctant, but then because of the kind of force that the government was exerting on them, people started criticizing. And after a year, the officials or the higher-ups realized that immediately something has to be done, because the criticisms were getting out of control. And Mao actually perceived it as a threat to his leadership, and immediately got the movement to a halt. The 100 Flowers campaign, it just lasted 1 year. And immediately what was launched was the anti-rightist movement. And here, this movement, it is very difficult for Chinese to forget this movement, because around 30,000 intellectuals were blamed as rightists. After the 100 Flowers campaign, around 30,000 people were blamed as rightists, and they had to be punished. And the penalties included criticism, informal criticism, which the Chinese found it very, very difficult to bear, because Chinese associate a lot of importance to face. And when you are criticized publicly, it is questioning your pride, it is questioning your honor, and the Chinese found it very difficult to to digest. And the penalties included informal criticism, hard labor. Now, this was the first time intellectuals were being sent to labor farms, where they were asked to do manual labor along with the peasants. They were exiled to labor farms, where they were asked to work with the peasants. And in some extreme cases, they were even executed. So this is something that the anti-rightist movement was all about. Now, after this movement, immediately, in the lines of 5-year plans, which Mao had borrowed from Russia, he initiated something called as the Great Leap Forward. Now, it is an economic and social campaign to industrialize the agrarian economy of China. So under this plan, agriculture was collectivized. You could not have individual farms. You had to work collectively. And on top of that, you also had to have some kind of an industry running around in your farms. So here the picture is about people melting steel in their farms. So this was a rather weird and ill-planned movement, which was launched by the Communist Party. And in fact, because it followed the anti-rightist campaign, many officials, well-meaning officials, did not want to complain about it, because they were afraid of what had just happened. So they gave false numbers, people were starving, and what led, what followed, then many people, it is estimated that anywhere between 15 million to 55 million people died of starvation. Now, this is what happened after the Great Leap Forward. A famine of unprecedented gravity. That is what we see. 55 million people losing their lives is something, and that too in modern times, is something completely unheard of. And it is also rumored that even when its population was dying, China was exporting rice just to keep up the face. That is what many critics have noted. So there we have a picture of a man dying of hunger. And this is what the Great Chinese Famine was all about. Next important political event took place, started in 1966, lasted for a decade, till 1976. It's called the Great Proletariat Cultural Revolution for the Chinese, and it is simply Cultural Revolution for the rest of the world. And this Cultural Revolution, it was purportedly launched by Mao to renew the Chinese spirit of revolution. But when we look back, in reality, it was a movement to consolidate Mao's power in the party, and also to quash dissent, any kind of dissent in the party. And this movement is very famous in China and the rest of the world because it was a cultural, you can call it a wasteland. That is what happened to Chinese culture during the Cultural Revolution. There was nothing cultural about it. And the famous Destroy the Four Olds movement in China, where old ideas, old culture, old customs, and old habits were completely destroyed in China. Now we have the Red Guards burning books, books and scripts which have lasted for centuries were burned down. Temples were ransacked. Statues were burnt. In fact, anything associated with the old was burned down. And in fact, this period is it's a period of extreme violence. It is a period of extreme chaos, and the Red Guards were brutal. And you have famous instances of Red Guards beating up their professors, Red Guards beating up their teachers, in fact, complaining against their families. It was a period of brutal, violence in China. And here I have a picture of statues being burnt, books being burnt, and there was a cult of personality surrounding Chairman Mao, and everyone was forced to read the Little Red Book. Now, the book that you see the Red Guards reading is this Little Red Book. Now, many of us have seen the comedy, I forgot the name. You have a professor with the different sets of kids, and you have a typical Chinese girl who always picks up a little red book. I forgot the name of the comedy, but then this figure comes out in our imagination, this girl who always quotes from this little red book. And so you have the Little Red Book here, which the Red Guards followed by heart. And then you have the song, The East is Red, which was played in almost all labor camps and almost all party meetings. It would invariably start with the song "The East is Red," which praised Chairman Mao. So it was mandatory for everyone to listen to the song and participate along. And also, the Mao suit became very popular. Now you must have seen Chairman Mao wearing a suit which has 4 pockets, and the Mao suit also gained a lot of popularity during this time. So basically, Mao became the be-all and the end-all of the Communist Party in China during this Cultural Revolution. In fact, that is what Mao wanted. And in fact, the violence got out of control, and the Red Guards were challenged by another group created by Mao Zedong himself. They called themselves the Rebel Red Guards. Now, in fact, the Red Guards and the Rebel Red Guards, the fighting became intense, and finally, the PLA, or the People's Liberation Army, had to be called in to rein in the Red Guards. Now, that time, many of these youth who had participated in these events were sent away for reform through labor. And in fact, it shaped a generation's political ideology, generation's views. In fact, for many of them, it was their highest as well as their lowest a moment as far as communism was concerned. So the Cultural Revolution officially ended following Mao's death in 1976. In fact, the party wanted to save its face, and the Gang of Four, which included Mao's wife, they were charged with treason, and Mao was sort of kept away from anything to do with cultural revolution. Now, then you have another new leader emerging in China, Deng Xiaoping, takes over China, and he's widely regarded and appreciated as the architect of modern China. So this is where you have the reform and opening up policies of the Communist Party of China, the 1990s. What we see is a renaissance of traditional Chinese culture. So traditional Chinese culture comes back with a bang in the 1990s, following the cultural wasteland of the Cultural Revolution. And here you have a lot of money being pumped in at sites, temples, sites of national importance, monuments, celebration of festivals, memorials. So a lot of effort by the government to reinvigorate the cultural scene in China, starting from the 90s onwards, which continues to the present day. Now, here I have a picture of some of the cultural factors in China. You have the Temple of Confucius, and you have the skyline of China. You have the massive high-rise building there. And then you have the Chinese cuisine, which is very famous all over the world. In fact, 8 distinct Chinese cuisines there. You have the cuisine map of China. And then you have the festival, the Red Lantern Festival, which again has been exported to various other parts of the world. We see the Red Lantern festivals almost in all major cities of the world today. And then the Chinese give a lot of importance to the family. That is why I have the picture of the family there. And festivals is a time for them to come and enjoy food. Food, again, has very symbolic meaning in China, and they enjoy food and they come together as a group. And family, even today, is given a lot of importance, especially the younger sons are given a lot of importance in China. And you also have the Shaolin Temple, which is a temple for martial arts, the Kung Fu. Kung Fu is something that has originated in China, and it is popular all over the world. So this is something which talks about the present China, where there is a huge revival of the traditional. That is why I said it is presenting the past. Again, the government has invested a lot of energy in reviving traditions which suffered a brutal blow during the Cultural Revolution. So there is a lot of effort to preserve and propagate Chinese culture all over the world, and setting up of centers like the Confucian centers have also helped in propagating the culture of China. So this is the first part of my presentation. I am overshooting time, I think. I'll just quickly take you, this is just modern Chinese literature, I'll just quickly take you through the various trends that we see in Chinese literature. And I'll talk about the post-Qing literature, which is modern Chinese literature. Now, the culture of China in 1905, we have the imperial exams being abandoned, and the May 4th movement of 1919 focuses on the vernacular Chinese. So we don't have to know classical Chinese anymore. Vernacular Chinese is also accepted as the written Chinese. So there is a new culture movement. There are intellectuals who have come from abroad, who have been, who know about the various isms happening in other parts of the world, and they have influenced Chinese culture in a radical way. So you have the new culture movement, and then of course the May 4th movement, where we have a vernacular Chinese being accepted, and then you have different sets of writers, associated with sentimental romance, and then you have art for art's sake. You have colorful names like Mandarin ducks and butterflies, and you have the Crescent Moon Society and all that. Then you have, with the Chinese Communist Party coming into the picture, you have something called the League of Left-Wing Writers. And there they say that art must concentrate on contemporary events in a realistic manner. So there you have importance being given to social realism, especially by the left-wing writers. And once the Communist Party came into power, you have the famous Yan'an talks by Mao, where the revolution in literature shifts to revolutionary literature. So there it is all about celebrating communism. And that became the national guideline for culture in China. Everything, it has to do with revolution. So if you are writing anything other than revolutionary literature, you are branded as a rightist. You are not a patriot. You have committed treason. And Mao's doctrine was literature and arts are subordinate to politics. So everything has to do with politics. If you don't, there is a set of guidelines that Mao issued, and all writers were supposed to subscribe to that. Now, with the establishment of the People's Republic of China, there was CCP's power grew over literature, and in fact, there was a nationalization of publishing industry, centralization of book distribution, in fact, complete institutionalization in China. Then when we come to the Cultural Revolution, no literature came during that period in China, because it was a period, as I said, where intellectuals or artists were hounded and banned, and they were hounded by the party. In fact, many of them, including the writer that I worked on, Gao Xingjin, he was forced to burn manuscripts of his books during the Cultural Revolution for fear of persecution. And all foreign literature, traditional Chinese literature, were barred during that period. And after the Cultural Revolution, we have something called scar literature, where writers talk about the trauma that they underwent during the Cultural Revolution. And after that, you have the New Realist movement, where a lot of importance is given to the inner self. Now, the inner self or the individual is of least importance as far as the Chinese Communist Party is concerned. Now, the party only opposed the collective. It did not concentrate on the individual. So individual or writings about the individual self were very new in China. And then again, we see a repeat of the anti-rightist campaign. You have the anti-spiritual pollution campaign, where the artists were particularly blamed for harboring dangerous ideas which were imported from the West. So again, a sort of, after a relatively free period of scar literature and New Realist movement, we again have a period of draconian politics, and the 80s were more experimental. You have a lot of experimentation, the value of self. You have the roots-seeking fiction, the stray youth fiction, these things, and the avant-garde, where many present major writers of China, they have all been a part of the 80s literature, be it Mo Yan or Gao Xingjin or all the major writers that we know of today. They've all started around the 80s and made a name for themselves in the 80s. Now, the 90s, again, commercial literature, commercialization, new spaces, a story of spaces, globalization comes in, new cultural experiences come in, new realist themes, Chronicle of a Blood Merchant, extremely popular. It's about the AIDS epidemic in China, so it's a very popular work. And then also you have the women novelists who talk about their bodies, which they couldn't really do so during maybe the 70s or 80s. So there is a lot of focus on the body of a woman, and many writers talk about it. Then, of course, you have the Chinese diaspora, which is huge. Chinese diaspora is everywhere. And the rise of Chinese diaspora gave worldwide recognition to Chinese literature. And then, of course, you have the Nobel Prize in 2000, which China did not acknowledge. This was a Chinese writer of French, a French writer of Chinese descent. That is how the Chinese media addressed him, because Gao Xingjin was exiled from China. He went on a self-imposed exile. He went to France, and he was a French citizen when he was awarded the Nobel Prize, and China called it a political move and never recognized the Nobel. However, China had to wait till 2012 when Mo Yan was awarded the Nobel Prize. And Mo Yan was celebrated all over. He was there in all the media, and China recognized him as the first Chinese Nobel laureate. And then we have children's literature, which is popular in China. Science fiction is a very, very important area of modern Chinese fiction, especially the three-body trilogy happens to be extremely popular all over the world. And online literature, again, is popular. The online literature, people are trying to challenge the kind of central control exercised by the party even today. And online literature is one of the ways in which they try to find those little fissures through which they can publish something and get away with it. And that is why online literature is popular. And some of the popular works include Beijing Coma, The Vagrants, Dream of Ding Village, etc. So these are some of the most popular Chinese works in translation. Now, Chinese literature today is extremely popular because of translation, and you have many writers in China who are bilingual today. So there are many writers who try to write in English or who are translating their works from Chinese themselves. Though their English might not be perfect, they have found a lot of takers. And because of bilingualism, Chinese literature is again gaining a lot of popularity. Now, to conclude, Chinese literature is one of the most powerful cultural forces in the world today, Chinese culture and literature. Now, history, communist ideology, Maoist movement, opening up of China have all contributed towards the beauty of Chinese culture. In fact, what is amazing about Chinese culture is its diversity. The diversity comes from the 56 ethnic groups in China. And the Han Chinese themselves are a very varied and distinct group, and China officially recognizes 56 ethnic religions. So the kind of ethnic groups, so the kind of diversity that we see in Chinese literature or Chinese culture for that matter, depends on this diversity. Now, the Chinese people, again, are extremely proud of their culture and history. And this is the Middle Kingdom syndrome, where China has always regarded itself as the Middle Kingdom, sanctioned by the heavens to rule over the world. So this syndrome is still attached. Many people still go by this Middle Kingdom syndrome, and that is why Chinese culture propagates or is where it is now today. And the picture there is a picture of the Bird's Nest Stadium, which China had built during the Summer Olympics in 2008. 2008, it had built, and it was a proud moment for China because it was hosting the Olympics for the first time, and it was brilliant. Those of us who watched it on TV remember it to be an extremely brilliant spectacle, the 2008 Summer Olympics. And believe it or not, China, in fact, hosted the Winter Olympics in 2021, where the rest of the world were reeling with COVID, which is said to have originated in China. But China recovered so fast that it could even host the Winter Olympics in 2021. In fact, the very same stadium, you had the Winter Olympics as well. So this is all about China. And I thank you. I would like to thank everybody for the very patient listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shruti. That was a very excellent and detailed presentation of what China was and what China is today. Thank you so much. I'm now opening the floor for questions, anything that you would like to add to. I think, Shruti, it would have been good if you could have talked a little about the festivals of China, particularly the Dragon Festival.
The Dragon Boat Festival, yes. Yeah. The Dragon Boat Festival, the Lantern Festival, these festivals are now being revived in a big way. And you have many Chinese visiting these places. The Lantern Festival, in fact, again, it is very popular, and it is not just in China. All over the world, the Lantern Festival is extremely popular. And I do have some notes on the festival here, ma'am. I didn't have time. I didn't want to include them here, but I had written down a few festivals as well. The Spring Festival.
The Dragon Festival, they associate their festivals with different zodiac signs, and also they sort of relate it to, say, good health, good luck.
Yeah, dragon has always been a very positive symbol. In fact, the Qing dynasty had the dragon on their flag, and the Chinese dragon is known as the Loong, L-O-O-N-G. The Loong is, in fact, it's a dragon with 4 legs, and the yellow emperor is said to have, descended from the yellow dragon, and they have this entire mythical association between power and dragon. And a dragon is also supposed to bring in a lot of good luck. And you have different kinds of dragons as well, and a lot of other mythical beings associated with China.
So the floor is open. Anyone who would like to ask questions? We have a few in the inbox, few comments in the inbox. Vasanthi Rami says, thank you, Shruti, very interesting and informative section about China. Then we have Chandraprabha saying, excellent talk, learned so much, congratulations. We have Gina saying, well presented, Shruti, good to hear you after a long time. And we have Deepa saying, very comprehensive and exhaustive, though within a short span of time, highly informative. So thank you from everyone who are in the chat box. Yes.
I just wanted
Asha,
to, yes.
you would like to say something? Yes.
Yeah. Because I was hearing everything from her, so I could remember that I had been in China in 2010. So it was a very memorable thing because 60 years Friendship Day were celebrated in China. That is China and India. And from AIWC, that time I was honorary treasurer, and Gomti ji was the president, and we two went to the China for this particular function. There was an exhibition, international exhibition, and this All China Women's Federation were invited us to stay there for 6 days. We were in the Beijing, we were in the Shanghai, and we went to that exhibition, and it was a very remembering things that I am still remember, that hospitality and their culture and everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashaji. Anyone else would like to?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Hello, Adya.
Hello, ma'am. Nice to see you again. It was a very nice presentation, and I was really looking forward for this presentation since it's about China and their culture. I'm really interested in that also. We just talked about the festivals right now, about the Dragon Boat Festival, Lantern Festival, etc. By talking about my personal favorite, I like the Mid-Autumn Festival among all other festivals. To be honest, I'm little embarrassed to say because I love Mid-Autumn Festival more than Onam or Onam. Because when it is the Onam season, I'll be like, yeah, okay, Pookalam Sadhya, done. But when it comes to October, the Mid-Autumn Festival time, I'll be like, oh my God, I have to make moon cakes. I have to make paper lanterns, etc. And I'll be so excited. So the Chinese festival really a good part in my life personally, and I have listened about this Chinese literature and all, and I have to add that the canonization of Chinese literature, especially through translation, have a very big impact, especially in these 2 to 3 years, because I'm a really big fan of translation of Chinese novels. And what I have found out that initially these novelists published these novels in web as web novels. It was originally written in Chinese, and the fans who read them and found it interesting, and these fans who are good at English translated it and posted in sites like Wattpad or other sites. And then, while reading the English translation, the fans of that novel became increased, and that's how this novel became popular. And some 2 or 3 years ago, while seeing this popularity of these unofficial translations, the publisher came and asked the author, the original author, to translate, to publish the translation officially. And it is really a big deep forward publishing the Chinese translation of novels. I was also a reader of that novel. It is called, it was written by the novelist Mo Xiang Tongshu, and the novel is called Tiangu and Sifu. And I have a copy of that. You
Very
can
good.
see. It's
Very
like
good.
this. Yeah, so the novel is really good. You can see.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else would like to join in?
There was a picture called, named as Last Emperor. It was also
Yes,
related
yes.
with the things, and it was very nice. I saw that picture. It was a very long picture, but still, I still remember everything from that picture.
Yes, it is about the last emperor Puyi. That is
Yeah,
this
yes.
Puyi.
Yes.
So that's all.
Chandraprabha wants to say something. You have unmuted. Chandraprabha?
Yeah, I have a question to see. How did dragon become so important? Is there some story about it, or
Uh,
Why
yes,
is
ma'am. Actually, in fact, the myth, there is a myth that the Chinese emperor, it is a mythical story, is said to be, in the form of a dragon. And that is how it is all started. And in fact, dragon is actually associated with power, and that is what in my readings, that is what I've come across. It is not just a dragon, but you have also a lot of other beings, some looking like a tortoise, and there are other beings as well, but nothing as powerful as the dragon. And traditionally, dragon has always been associated with power, royalty, and that is why it is the emperor. Like even in the Forbidden City, you have dragon figurines, and the red dragon or the golden dragon. In fact, it is the golden dragon which is associated with royalty, and you have it in their robes, you have it in their flags, and a dragon with a pearl. Again, that is something that we see in many of these paintings on dragons, a dragon with a pearl. So my understanding is that it's because of the association with the emperor and the dragon. The emperor is said to be a descendant of the yellow emperor is said to be a descendant of the dragon. So that is why dragons have been very popular.
Actually, they are part of, say, they are on carpets,
Carvings,
pottery.
yes.
There are
everywhere?
a lot of
Everywhere,
these,
they are everywhere.
And even when they have athletic meets and they have gatherings, I think for the Olympics also they had the dragon coming.
And the dragon dances are also extremely popular, where people, a group of people, they dress up as dragons and they dance about. That is also extremely
They
popular.
actually celebrate the Chinese Day with this dragon. I remember in Australia, on the beach, the Chinese had this display when it was the Chinese New Year. So they had the dragon, and it's a number of people who stand under the dragon,
the paper mesh dragon.
They make it out and they run around. It's really great seeing it. Yes, Gina, you want to ask something? Yes.
Good evening, ma'am. Shruti, it was very informative, and I could actually connect to many things I saw at Hong Kong when I visited Hong Kong, especially the Mid-Autumn Festival as well as the Lantern Festival. And again, I would like to add that, just as we have the Vishu Kainitam, during these festivals, the companies over there, they provide the employees with a voucher, almost all the employees. So they kind of promote their culture and tradition all along, yeah. So
they have this, the elders give their children money in a red envelope.
Yeah, not just the elders and the kids, I mean, almost all the companies, employees are given.
That's a nice gesture. Good for the employees. And another interesting fact that I came across, was that we all have, the Georgian calendar has 12 months, but the Chinese calendar has 13 months. Because they follow the lunar solar
calendar, yes.
And the leap year, it's during the leap year that they have these 13 months. The other years, it is 12 months. So China has become a world power that people have to reckon with. Yes, Usha?
Yeah, I think Srikala wants to say something.
Srikala? Srikala, please unmute.
You there?
Srikala, unmute yourself. Parnadu.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
Shruti, it was very nice listening to you. It was a wonderful talk, and you have given us so much of details about China, its culture and literature. And
Thank
it was
you,
a
ma'am.
wonderful presentation. And I remember the days we were at the Institute of English together. We had such a nice time, the teacher
True.
fellows and you researchers. Yes, congrats.
Thank
Keep
you,
going.
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kala. We have Shama Kumari saying congrats to the excellent presentation. Very interesting and informative and an eye-opener of Chinese culture from past to present. Thank you, Shama Kumari. Anyone else?
Then can we
Usha. Yeah, take over.
thoughts and conclude? Thank you, Shruti, for that very interesting presentation. And as somebody just mentioned, it took us through the Chinese history of almost, more than 4,000 years from 2070 BC to 2023 now. And it was very interesting, and many facts that which I was not aware. I'm sure many others were also not aware. And then how you have linked up the traditional thing with the communist era and how they have come out of that and how they are progressing now. It was very interesting. And then, of course, about the literature. Literature, as somebody mentioned, we have now only very recently we have started reading the translations of Chinese works, and I'm sure a lot more will come soon, and we'll be able to enjoy much more of I'm sorry. Somebody is talking.
Somebody.
Just mute her.
Yeah, go ahead, Usha.
I'm sorry for that. So it has been very interesting, and as Jamila mentioned, all the previous talks that we had under the series of G20 have been very, very interesting, and we have had a lot of people attending these webinars. But not only that, I think because of the time, maybe the time doesn't suit all, so many more people, nearly 100 or more people have been watching on YouTube. So this is also on YouTube. I'll be circulating the link, and you can circulate it in all your groups so that more people can watch this. And about the next lecture, Jamila, you would like to say something? The next one in the series?
Yes, we have Gina Manoj here. Will you just put on your, yeah, good. Gina will be talking to us on Turkey, which will be the next country that we are going to. So from Japan to China, we are flying to Turkey next month, first Saturday. I think that's the 5th of...
I think it's 2nd, ma'am. 2nd of September.
2nd
of September.
2nd of September. So that will be our talk on Turkey. Gina has worked extensively on Turkish writers, and her writer for the research program was Orhan Pamuk, one of my favorite writers as well. So we are looking forward to hearing you, Gina, next month, first Saturday. I will talk about her more when we introduce her for the program next time. So all of you who have joined us here on this platform, it is going to be Turkey next month. So please do join us. And thank you, Shruti, for that very, very informative and interesting talk that you gave us. And as Usha said, we are actually scaling up the number of viewers on our YouTube. And that speaks volumes of the interesting and detailed presentations that are being made on the G20 countries. And I'm sure this will reach across to other countries also, we hope.
Yes, and
Thank
I
you.
hope you will circulate these links to all your groups so that more people come to know, because we have seen that all these presentations have been really very rich in information and very, very interesting. I hope more people get to watch it. And though I think India's presidency will get over by November or so, but we'll continue the series till we cover all the 20 countries.
Yes.
It will overshoot the presidency period, but still we'll continue with the series. And all of you are welcome to all and it is always on the first Saturday of the month. So in case you don't get the link by that time, please contact us, and we'll try to create a group so that we can put all invites on that group, and all of you will definitely get it.
Yeah, all the speakers of the G20 countries.
Yes, and we'll put all the speakers in this, and this is the 31st session under the Literary and Cultural Forum of AIWC-TVPM main branch, and we are really very proud that we have been able to carry it on regularly and with very different topics. We have covered a lot of topics under these series, from environment to indigenous people to literature, art, museums, and almost every aspect we have covered. And it has been a really enriching experience for us as well. And we have had very eminent speakers. And in this series particularly, we have had very young speakers, which has been a very interesting aspect of this G20 series. And I'm sure we are going to see more of young speakers in this series. So with that, I thank all of you for joining this webinar, and we hope to see all of you again in next month for the session on Turkey. So after Japan and China, we are going to another interesting country, and a country about which we know very little, I think, because we are not very familiar with Turkey. So we hope to learn a lot more from your talk, Gina, and we look forward to that talk. So thank you. So
Thank
with this,
you.
ending
Thank
this.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jamila, for leading this forum so well. Thank you.
Thank you, Shruti. Once
Thank you,
again.
ma'am. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we look forward to hearing you, Gina.